you should know is I come from a family of psychoanalysts. Both my parents were psychoanalysts. Come up with whatever jokes you want. I'm happy to hear them. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Generally, when people meet me and they get to talk to me for a few minutes, they go, "Wow, you don't seem that effed up." That's like the nicest thing anybody says to me for like the last 30 years.
Welcome to the Hidden Summit podcast. My name is Kevin Valance, and I want you to know you have found your place where you can become better. But listening may not be enough. I do want you to understand that taking action on your life is what's going to actually help you change your life and start to go down the path where you can reach your peak and your full potential. We're going to talk on topics such as mindset, nutrition, movement, and everything in between. Sometimes we'll have guests, other times it'll just be me. But at the end of the day, I want you to understand my goal is to help you as a 30-plus-year-old prioritize health through holistic health and wellness so you can live the life that you are proud of. As always, this episode is sponsored by Ice Barrel. I've been using my Ice Barrel every day for a minimum of 3 minutes a day since 2020, and the benefits are endless. But a few of the benefits I want you to understand: it's not just physical. Sure, we'll reduce inflammation after difficult training sessions so we can recover better and have better performance in our training. But why I like the Ice Barrel is because instantly after getting out of the Ice Barrel, it improves my mood and mental health and the clarity of mind to go about the challenges that I face every single day. Another benefit I want you to understand is that it will help you increase your metabolism. And I don't just mean burning fat and building muscle. I mean, you'll have the energy you need to be the person that you want to be throughout the course of every day. You can use the code HSICE to save on your Ice Barrel, 300, 400, 500, or any of their accessories on the website. I love my Ice Barrel, and I know you're going to love it too. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. I had an instant connection with. One that I found out just moments ago was way more profound. And I'll speak to it, and please correct me if I'll paraphrase.
I'll do it.
Jason and I met at another Founders Only retreat in Colorado. And he had just walked in the door, and Chris and I had walked in just after, and we were the first ones there. And we initiated a conversation, which was followed by a workout. And I was open and vulnerable, that so much so that it impacted Jason to the point where he didn't let me know until about 35 minutes ago what had actually happened. And I say this because I spoke about losing my father, right? He was 59 years old. He was overworked, out of shape, overweight, depressed, and he lost his life at 59. And when I brought this up, I was talking about how that impacted me at first, imploded, right? Then I went all in on health and fitness and said that was never going to be me, out of anger almost. And that shifted into, I can't help him because he's gone, but I felt him and his presence there with me to go out and help somebody else in hopes that they would make a choice to take care of their life so other people would not have to experience what my brother and I experienced. And that's a reason why we're here today, because I want to bring people together. So if you walk away with one thing to help yourself go down the path that you deserve in health and in your mindset, mental positivity, growth, that's going to push you to be the version of yourself that you truly desire. And it just so happened that in that moment, to the minute,
Pretty much to the minute, almost to the second.
Jason's father had passed away 34 years prior. And that was heavy. And I'm happy you brought it up now. It's just a matter of, like, you never know who you're going to impact when you let your guard down. And you can be your true, authentic self. And it's really hard to do that these days. And I wanted to share that before we get into, I'm gonna spoil their introduction, so I'll let you say who you are, what you do, how long you've been doing it. But I really want you guys to open up, ask questions, be vulnerable, because this is a safe space. And the more you're able to do that for you, regardless of what it is that you're going through in this moment, I promise you, it'll lead you to be the best version of yourself in a moment down the line. So, without further ado,
I can't even follow that.
Jason.
So my name is Jason Ross. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. For those of you who weren't sure, psychotherapist is one word. Some of you will get that joke later. Some of you got it now. Glad we could break the ice a little bit, because usually when you're a psychotherapist and you meet people, they look like they're bracing for something. It looks sort of like it did at the waiting room of my proctologist. No one looks like they're okay. And it tends to be, it's great on airplanes sometimes though, because if someone wants to talk to you and then they find out you're a psychotherapist, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to divulge everything and stuff you didn't want to know, or they're going to clam up like they're on the beach in a shell. So it was interesting for me doing what I do, which is pretty deep work with people. What you should know is I come from a family of psychoanalysts. Both my parents were psychoanalysts. Come up with whatever jokes you want. I'm happy to hear them. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Generally, when people meet me and they get to talk to me for a few minutes, they go, "Wow, you don't seem that effed up." That's like the nicest thing anybody says to me for like the last 30 years. When I talk to people in my office, I'm not saying there's an over-under on how fast they're going to cry and break down, but there is. And here I was, somewhere where I didn't know anybody technically. I just meet him and he opens up. And again, he's a guy. So the odds are much lower that he's going to say anything vulnerable or emotional or open. I'm just, him, no, but the statistics we know. And I was stunned. And I almost looked at my watch like, now? I just got here. This can't be. I'm about to get my butt kicked by all these people tomorrow. And he opens up with this so profound and vulnerable. And it was just a wonderful thing to hear, so spiritual. So that's how it started. And part of me wanted to say something right then. And I said, no, hold it. Just hold it for a while. It'll be a little bit uncomfortable. What most conversations with therapists tend to be. Uncomfortable. However, they can be very profound and have a lot of power. When you grow up in a family where psychotherapy is sort of advised, it's a little bit different. The rules are different for you. They say you're supposed to show your feelings. And growing up in my family, I learned who could and who could not. And I realized nobody was that good at it. I realized I was actually the best at it, and I found out down the line. So, when you hear people talk about experiences they've had, and I definitely want to sort of carry, part of what you and Drew were talking about, vulnerability, spirituality, getting free of stuff. You mentioned anxiety, right? I mean, everybody's anxious. Everybody. And scary, nobody really knows why. People themselves don't exactly know why they're anxious. You're never really anxious about the thing that's happening at the moment. I'll give you one caveat for that, just to be clear, in case anybody goes home with this. If you're on the beach and you're going into the water and you're afraid of sharks, fair. Your anxiety's solid. It's good. If you're on the beach, but you're not going in the water and you're afraid of the sharks, that's a problem, okay? Because that's not going to happen. People are really struggling with this stuff. So, I try to, there were so many things that went through my head as I'm listening to you. Failure. Okay. So anxiety and failure and the relationship there. So many people are afraid of failing. They don't even know why. So what do you have to do? You have to understand how you learned about failure and what it meant to you. In my early 20s, which is a long time ago, to give you an idea of how old I am, let's just say the Beatles were still a band, okay? I'll leave it at that. I could say my age, but it's a better joke. Just saying. So you learn about failure and the attachment to it growing up until maybe you get to a point where you realize maybe I don't need to give a damn, right? There's different moments. I hope if you're younger, you go and you get some counseling and you go, what am I really afraid of and why? And once you really understand that, you might make very different decisions. I knew that as a young teen, went through a lot, early adult went through a lot. You ever see all these reels, and we're talking about social media, these reels about like, what would you tell the younger version of yourself? You ever see those?
Yeah.
I think, what are you doing? That's what I think I would tell myself. Are you okay? That's what I would be asking the younger version of myself. Are you okay? Because nobody asked. Nobody asked. It was the only question that needed to be asked. Nobody asked. Right? So if you're anxious, go back to it, just keep going around with this. If you're anxious, there's a reason. If you're sad, there's a reason. What we have more than ever around us, so there's more therapists. There's a couple in training in this room, I know, which is cool. There's more therapists on the ground. There's more in schools than ever before. And there's more anxiety and depression nowadays. There's more medication. There's more self-medication. And people with all the things that we may have don't seem happier. Seem odd? It's all this information. So you learn a lot of things growing up. Everything's like an attachment. So you learn your attachment to failure. The people who don't have the attachment to failure, it's a very interesting thing. Have you ever seen Jesse Itzler and Sarah Blakely? Probably, I would argue, the two best at that idea. And I've met Jesse. I remember him when I was a kid. If you listen to her, she was taught to fail. Probably the best skill you can learn. When you're not attached to that anymore, you get into more of your purpose. You can't get into your purpose if you beat the crap out of yourself emotionally. If you beat the crap out of yourself emotionally, you need to go to therapy. Okay? You need to go to therapy. You got to get to some of the core issues. Some people have traumas. You may have heard this word before. It's one of the most hot topic. I feel like trauma is the most abused word, and that's wrong. People struggle with it. I didn't think I had trauma, which was interesting. And then one day, I realized why I really became a therapist. You know, people say, oh, I just really want to help people and stuff. Yeah, you do. And there's a reason you showed up at this door. So dads. So I thought my father wanted me to be a doctor. And he sent me a letter not too long before he died, which clearly stated that he did not want that. And I'm like, what the I've been doing all this stuff. I'm worried. I'm anxious. I'm hating, and you didn't want this? Could somebody explain? Could somebody express this clearly? Give me a memo. Anything. I'll take anything. So I came to a real fork in the road. I was dealing with the fact that I knew I had some dreams which didn't quite fit the family dynamic. I wanted to be a comedian and an actor. That wasn't totally looked down upon either, which was really weird. I had to juggle that. My father thought the jokes were funny. He thought the impressions were great. I'm like, now what am I going to do? I had to balance out how confident I was, which was not, and I had to have a clear vision that, yeah, you're not ready. I went to grad school, and I said, this will pay off one day. I turned out to be right, but I didn't understand how. I graduated in 1995 with my master's. I did not enter the field for 10 years. Everybody's like, what the hell were you doing for 10 years? Still figuring it out. I can relate greatly, particularly when you mentioned your brother, because I have a sister. She is like the apple of my eye. I cry even talking about her. And we were, though 3.5 years apart, we went through a lot at the same time. And it's almost like two different stories. And you two were in the same house, right? You saw the same, where you are when trauma happens. And this is, if I was going to get one thing across, I know you're hearing a lot right now. When you go through a trauma, what happens, and this is why therapy, I'm a big believer. Everybody know what regular constipation is? I know it sounds like we all know what constipation is, right? Okay, I just want to make sure in case someone said I've never heard of it. Just want to make sure. I know there's a lot of fiber commercials on. But yeah. But emotional constipation is very unique, and pretty much everybody has suffered from it at one time or another. They just didn't know it. And what happens with emotional constipation, very much depending on your age, your family system, who and how they communicate in your family, your traumas, there's 4 feelings in what they call cognitive behavioral therapy, mad, sad, glad, and afraid, okay? We're going to remove glad, which is happy, whatever we perceive. And by the way, this whole thing with everybody being happy, we can't all be happy all the time, okay? It's just not possible. You can be content, you can be fulfilled, but no one's going to be super joyous all the time. You can be upbeat, you can have a great positive attitude, but there's this drive to every kid should be happy. You cannot be happy without failure. Ain't going to happen. It's actually almost a 401k for therapists, this notion. I'm serious. It sounds sick, but it's the truth. You end up with mad, sad, and afraid. Okay. Most people have trouble admitting when they're afraid, which is an important skill you have to learn. If you don't know what you're afraid about, go journal about it. Serious. Figure out what you're really afraid about. Again, if you're worried about the sharks in the water, that's fine too. But what you're really afraid about and where it came from. Because what happened at some point is something happened, nobody dealt with it, and what'd you have to do? Shove it down. That's what people do. They shove down their feelings. That's how the constipation usually starts. Sadness and anger. There's this whole idea like no one should be sad. And by the way, if I'm doing any accents, I'm just from New York, so don't take anything personally. I know, Chris. Thank you. Like, yeah. So, like, no one should be sad. No, you should be able to be sad. In fact, the more you can do sad, the better you can do happy. The better you can do joy, elation, and that's part of fulfillment. And anger, most people never express it. Why? Because you're told, don't show it. Men and boys, generally, they're told to repress it. You know, be a man. That's why if you've ever watched Analyze This, the Billy Crystal, Robert De Niro film, one of the funniest lines in the whole movie is when Crystal basically says to Robert De Niro, his patient, you have 2 feelings, anger and rage. Yeah. You know, I don't know who wrote it. It's fantastic. So if you find you have anxiety, you're probably repressing or suppressing, depending on who asking, your emotions, particularly sadness and traumas. I know it's just like big stuff to go through, but I definitely learned that when I went through trauma, particularly the loss of a parent and the illnesses that led up to it, you had to repress everything. Why? Because I found out what was going on. The first thing, oh, have a nice day at school. I went into school the next day and tried to pretend for like the next 6 years that everything was okay. That was not a good move. It was not a good move. I don't recommend it. Because sometimes when we go into those situations, there aren't a lot of choices. So I kind of tell people, like, don't blame and shame yourself for those choices. You got to work through it. If you're going to have the pain, have it. Like, you're not going to get entitled to a lot in this life, right? You're going to have to work for a lot. But you are entitled to your feelings. Yes, you got to be a little bit judicious on how you show it and how you express it and how you connect with it. But it was a profound experience for me to get the vulnerability that I did at that moment, I went to this event. I had two choices, basically. I could go do a 4-day training, therapeutic training, which would have been nice. Somewhere in New York. It actually would have been this weekend. Or I could go to this event with people that are, without fail, younger and more fit. And I'm going to get my butt kicked because I am vulnerable in that regard. And I had no question in which choice I was going to make. What I can tell you is, if you make the vulnerable choice, the one you might fear a little more, your self-esteem is going to go up. Most people who struggle with anxiety, purpose, and the other thing you see on, and I'm not here to beat social media up, but there's some wonderful things on it. Technically, it's almost how I ended up getting to you. It's because I saw Eric on social media. So I can't.
It's out there.
It's out there. It can be used as a phenomenal tool to nurture you. There's this idea of you got to figure out your why. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of slant on it. If you figure out who you really are, and if you've ever heard the concept inner child, if you deal with that and you work with it, you start to really figure out who you are. You get in touch and you get your self-esteem. Your purpose will be driven. You'll figure it out. It's much easier to figure it out. People get anxious just trying to figure that out. And then with social media, what they do is they're watching, comparing to everybody. Fantastic. If I was going to prescribe anxiety, I would say do that. That's the thing. I got to a place, as I'm going through some of the stuff that I went through when I was younger, I started doing stand-up comedy because I was very shy. Because I put myself in that position, I built one of the longest relationships with a caring mentor friend in my life. I kept doing it. So I've worked professionally as a stand-up comedian. I've worked professionally as a musician, and I still do, which was my dream thing. It was one of my bucket list items that I thought I would never do. The upside that I can tell you with it is I failed in multiple states, multiple times, in multiple decades, okay? And I'm going to tell you it was worth it, okay? Because it paid off, and it's been a lifelong dream that is still continuing to this day. Now, the conversation I had with you yesterday was about regret. So I just thought I'd throw it out there a little if I could. So what do I see as a therapist? Sadness, regret. I didn't think I was ready to be a comedian and actor at 21, 22. I was not confident. I just know, for whatever reasons, I wasn't. I went to grad school. Okay, that's the smart choice, okay? My mother said this would be a good idea. I listened to my mother. My mother, by the way, gave me this, pardon my French, bullshit story, okay? I'm going to tell you the story. She'd been telling me the story since I was like 10. She said there was this young man who wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and his mother had basically said to him, you should go to medical school, and then you could, if you become a successful doctor, you can then go do stand-up comedy, and, et cetera, and you'd make it. And she then told me he did this, and he would fly out on his own private jet to multiple gigs. Okay. I think the story's bullshit, and I'll tell you why. I've never heard of this guy. I've never seen him do comedy. I don't know who he is, and I know all the comedians. Yeah, he's so successful. I think my mother lied to me, and I think she did a great job, just to be clear. But I had one regret. And then at 32, it got turned up a notch. A writer from Saturday Night Live happened to be one of my personal training clients when I was personal training in between grad school and then when I got into the field. And I asked him one day, I said, because I wanted to be him. I wanted to do what he did for a living. I thought it was the best job in the world. That was what I always dreamed of. I said, if I want to do what you do, what would I do? I asked. I wasn't afraid of failing at this point. Let me be vulnerable because I just knew. He gave me this wonderful response. I still have the email. It's 20-something years later. I then waited 15 years to take it up. 15 years. That put me into my 40s. And in my 40s, I basically made a bet with myself. And I said, I'm going to risk everything to go do this. And that's what I went out and did. I risked everything. I said, I've worked hard to get my practice where I am. Great. What can I do about this? I got an idea. Let's screw it up and risk everything. You want to talk about being intentional? And I moved back to New York for 9 months to start acting and writing. And that's what I did. And I'm still doing it. I'm still in it. Again, if you're depressed, talk to somebody. If you've watched over the last couple of years, everybody know who Anthony Bourdain is?
Yeah.
It's hard to say Anthony Bourdain didn't go after what he was passionate about. And I would argue that there was something he did not take care of for himself, for his soul. You're talking about spirituality, the passion. You got to do something that's spiritual to you. I got a little bit lucky. I did. I come from a very weird family. I do. My odds of the odds of being born are like 1 in a trillion. Is it? I forget what it is. More than that, right? A couple trillion. I've got even more because my parents were for 2 different countries and they met on a blind date. So you sit and you go, how did this happen? I fell into the field and I just knew helping people is where I wanted to be. But the more important part of it is you're connecting with others. You're vulnerable and you're connecting. People build the trust. If you're struggling with repressed trauma or just trauma, I have a thing we do in the office. Early on, if I get somebody there, it's kind of like, we call it the shit you never talked about that you need to. And they've got to write the shit list. And if they're strong at the point they can do this, we start to go, if we start dealing with this, you're going to have less anxiety, you're going to have less depression, you're going to have more empowerment. Does that make sense so far? I know I'm throwing like the book out here, but we said we talk about a couple of things, and and this is all because we've all experienced stuff that was painful for us. And I literally walk into this place, and he opens up to me. And I'm thinking, this only happens in my office, and I felt bad not saying anything. But it was the weekend that my father had passed. And I knew I wanted to be out with other people. I'm certainly far removed from it and, certainly gone through some counseling over it. But I was like, I want to be around something. And sure enough, there was a series of events that week which hit me and got me really emotional. Not angry, just vulnerable, We like to joke about it, but, generally men don't talk about their emotions. But the practice of it's amazing because it'll help you to tap into so many different things that you need to do. So, that's like the warm up. Yeah.
I don't even think I knew you were a psychotherapist when we jumped into that.
No, you did. It was really funny. I was like, he has no idea who he just said this to. If he knew, I want to see what would have happened.
Yeah, probably would have been the same thing.
Probably been the same. Yeah. So anybody here struggle, just out of curiosity, struggle with anxiety, purpose, or like fear of going after stuff? Again, I know this is a kind of wellness oriented group, so it's a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an honest answer. I think we all have levels of it. It's not like I don't. People said, do you get nervous before you go on stage? Yeah, you get a little nervous. The catch is, how attached are you to the outcome versus being in it? I go to perform on stage. I have 2 pieces of it, in all honesty. I sucked at playing for a long time. I did. I was not good enough. You try failing in auditions in 3 states and see how your esteem is. But I couldn't let go because that was the kid piece in me that I had to nurture and still do. And putting it out there, I was like, I like the interaction with the crowd. Certainly hearing a crowd, come together is awesome, right? And I'm like, this is so great because this wasn't handed to me. So I think too many people are worried about the outcome. But what I've seen across with entrepreneurs, I don't consider myself like that. You guys, yes, all of you, but they're not attached too much to the outcome. They're having a lot of fun. they're like, what am I going to grow? How am I going to learn? You know, I always hear like Gary Vaynerchuk talk about, you know, how he blew Tesla, not Tesla, Uber, multiple times. You know, it's like, I'd like to be able to make those kind of mistakes. Sure, wouldn't we all? But I think if the fear comes up, you just ask yourself, what's this really about? What is it really about for me? That's a skill I had to learn. And you can go to grad school. It doesn't matter. Like the grad school thing, you got to go, and you'll learn some theory and some all that. But a lot of the stuff that we actually learn is, you know, much after.
The experiences, yeah.
And the experiences. So I kind of want to just give you that, you know, broad idea of like, if you think you need to talk to someone, guess what? You do. You had a thought about, yeah, maybe I should go to. If everybody says you really need to see a therapist, guess what? You need to see a therapist, right? If a therapist calls you, you need to see a therapist. You know what Drew was saying about managing yourself. The practices manage you. That's, you know, and lots of people have different physical, spiritual practice. Like wellness is emotional, spiritual, physical, social, and intellectual. Most people screw up, so to speak, emotional, spiritual, physical. And those will end up affecting intellectual and social. Most people that are struggling, the more grounded, the more spiritual. It doesn't mean religion. For some people, that's not what it's going to be. It's actually going to be something else. But it's something that connects you, grounds you, puts you around people, makes you vulnerable, all that. I think it's huge. And again, if I had like a hashtag, it'd be like, you know, get therapy, obviously, because I believe it. I think it's like use everything. Use every entity you can get to make yourself feel like, yeah, my esteem is at a, you know, because we have to work at it. Yeah, hey, a couple of people got it kind of young. There's a few, you know, there's a few where they have, okay, great. You came from maybe a more normal family. Okay. You ever see that meme, the one that says it's the National Association for People from Normal Families, and there's two people in the audience who are sitting like very far apart? You ever seen this? Yeah. So, just wanted to kind of throw all that out so you have like some things to think about. And you know, when you go after something like, I can only just say like, I hope you go and like attack it like you're going to fail anyway, and who cares? Because if you're not having fun, yeah, you messed up. The best things that have happened to me were when I had no concern about the outcome. And when I went all in a bunch of years, 8 years ago, I was like worried about failing. I've perfected failing. Are you kidding me? What's going to happen now? I'm going to hurt my esteem? It's like, no, I'm not interested in what anybody else thought. I had to be really just true to myself to go, I got to do this for me, because there's no one going to take this away later. Like no one, there's no pill, you know, there's no pill for regret.
The funny thing is we know what failure feels so much more like than success does. Like, can you really say that we're successful in everything that you want to be successful in, or have you failed more times? And I just think that's a really easy map to look at. Like, well, you're going to fuck up. Learn, visualize, take action, move forward, grow.
Yeah. It's like, if nobody else was watching and you don't care what anybody else thinks and you don't have to compare, what are you going to do? And that's kind of the methodology for people. And the people who do that consistently, they're pretty fulfilled.
A buddy of mine, his grandmother or his aunt said to him, don't make any big decisions in your 20s because you care about what everybody else thinks. And then in your 40s, you just care about what you think. And then in your 60s, you don't give a fuck about what anybody thinks. So like somewhere in there, like wait for it.
I'm right about to go over that edge.
There you go. Yeah. I love it. It's awesome.
It's like, yeah, I don't care. It's like, you're happy and you're connected. You feel great.
Yeah. So I got a couple questions.
Sure.
Did you write and script and star in Disney and Pixar's Inside Out?
No, I did not. They have not called. Can you believe it?
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, you touched on your inner child.
Yeah.
right? I'm generally curious to lean into and see your perspective on coming from a place of curiosity and as a child would to make that happen, and what you did to get there, because you said there was just these gaps of static and not moving forward. So like, how did you come to and like really connect with what you wanted as a child to get curious and take action?
I think that's a really great question. That's a deep one. I think enough fear and pain. I had, I was talking about regret. I had a regret, and I had to cope with the idea that in my early 20s, I was not confident, and I did not go after something because I was afraid that I might fail, and I did not know what I was going to do with it. I could handle a lot of things. I could handle some really difficult things, but I wasn't prepared for that. So I think over time, and again, therapy and coaching and, a lot of self-help, to say, well, what do I really want? And, inner child, because the inner child is basically, it's really the younger version of you. It's the younger version of you that you had kind of before anything went haywire. Okay? You're like,
when happiness was really everything, kind of.
when like before the world told you, yeah, this place has some problems. Like people grow up in different. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, can you give us some specifics on how to tap into that like inner narrative, inner child work? Because I'm just gonna speak for myself personally. Like I have a lot of disassociation from my memory related to childhood trauma. And so I'm like figuring it out now and going through it, like reworking it. I had a similar story to Drew where I kind of followed a path that I was misaligned with and had to bring myself back to doing something that really spoke to my inner child. But it's been really hard to be like, was that my inner child, or is that who like like your parents tell you who you were as a kid? Like how can you tap into finding that spirit of your inner child and really getting to say?
Sure. So sometimes we have to separate out the voices, right? This is in some families, like there might be an expectation. You're going to be this when you're going to grow up. There's the kid version of you that came up before that, or before that became more powerful. It's really a therapeutic thing as far as inner child work. It's deep, intensive work. So it's getting connected where you can just sort of sit and feel for that kid, and you literally feel connection. Like most people are struggling feeling disconnected. Most people, they are. Look, walk around, right? You can see it, and you can see their countenance. You can see their face. It's like, wow, because something stopped. They forgot to laugh. You go to a comedy club and people are not laughing, and it's not because the comedian's not good sometimes. People stop thinking it was okay to just be. So it's like, how do you tap? Probably every which way. I think that is the power in sitting down with somebody who can create, and I like the word you use a lot, safe space, right? Because it is super important when you're doing therapeutic work that you're like, yeah, I can trust that if I fall down, so to speak, here emotionally, this person's going to pick me up. That's the job, right? That is the job that a therapist does. I had to be realistic about what I've gone through. You don't have to maximize everything, but you can't minimize it. Most people, I'm fine. Does everybody know the acronym for FINE? Good. I was going to ask you. Can you repeat it?
Insecure, neurotic, and
emotional. Yep. Thank you. Yeah. That's, I heard that after I got my license, and I'm like, that's one of the best acronyms I've ever heard. People are walking around like that because they don't want to show anything. So when you're really connected, inner child, it's like the phrase you'll hear a lot out there is, the only two things you need approval from are the 8 and 80-year-old version of you. That's the idea. I took a cross section of ages for me, and I was like, I was willing enough to admit what was painful for me, and sometimes that's what somebody has to do. And again, that's why being with somebody who's Strong is good.
Love it.
Good. Yeah.
I guess it's twofold from a professional versus maybe peer group family. How important is it who you choose to let yourself be vulnerable and how they take that in? And I ask that because I don't know anyone else in this room that well, and some of you. I've done a lot of therapy. No one probably knows that about me. I've had 2 different therapists for me specifically tell me I don't need to see them anymore about things that I would argue is probably not true. And so, and those are professionals. So I'm curious from a professional and again, peer group, because I've also been in the position where you open up to others, and they perhaps take it the wrong way. They use that against you. How important is it to go about that process? I know that's a tough question.
It's a great one. The opening up. Remember that I'm biased. I'm not saying I'm wrong. I'm admitting I'm biased because this is sort of like the if you ever saw those commercials, I'm not just the hair club president. I'm also a client. Okay, I've had to do this. I can talk trash because I've chosen this is the way to go. You're probably not going to tell many people things about you. There's all levels of depth. Yeah, we got an interesting one, out front. Great. And there are some things you're going to have to go with your gut. Clinically, that's where I've laid out more. Clinically, that's where I've laid out, and it was incumbent on me to choose and figure out who's going to be that person. As I got older, I also got better at it.
Sure.
I got better at it because I trusted myself and my gut more.
If you're someone who's already resistant to the concept of doing that, and then you have that person who you get vulnerable with, and then they say that, it's like, fuck.
Yeah, it's a very look. There's a lot of negative comments you obviously hear about therapists. I got it right after childhood. The one thing I would tell somebody if I was going to give the actual advice on it is like, find somebody who you think there's something about them that you want to parallel or mimic. There's something about the way they carry themselves that you connect or vibe with. Again, it should be a therapist who's done their own work. Yeah. You got to go with your gut, and you'll know because you're therapist, you're going to see their comfort level, right? They're going to, if it's difficult, they're not going to shy away. They might say, all right, let's drop the hammer on this one. Yeah. We can go further. It's an art. I wish that part were more science.
Sure.
I don't know if that answers your question at all. Yeah?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Do you have one?
Yeah, I was gonna ask them, have you heard of parts work? And if so, what do you think about parts work?
My understanding of it, I'm going to say is somewhat limited still. It's become a big buzzword. So you'll have the 3 big ones now are inner child, parts work, shadow work. I think anything that helps you understand your trauma, your ego. Ego's a big one. Because there's healthy ego, which is called ego strength.
Ego, because most people think of it as like ego. He's so ego.
I'll give you a definition. I'm pretty willing you're going to remember. My understanding of it this far, which needs more, is very helpful for those people who do it, because you're going deeper. If you're going deeper and it's a safe space, probably helpful. If that gives you a little bit. Okay. As far as ego, we most associate ego with narcissism. So there's something called egos. So the concepts are id, ego, and superego. Those are Freudian concepts. And by the way, Freud was right, just so you hear it from my words, on almost everything. No one believes a thing he did anymore, apparently because he used cocaine. Everybody used cocaine apparently then. I don't know why, but he gets a lot of shit for it. Like the whole thing's wrong because he did this in his practice, okay? Yeah. The whole other rant, we'll do that a different day because you got better things to do. Right. So id is your instinctual desires, like hunger, sex drive. Okay. Ego is actually the interface with society. Okay. It's that funnel. Okay. If you have ego strength, you tend to be confident. If you have an unhealthy ego, you tend to be overinflated and narcissistic. And superego is really the judge. So the more sociopathic somebody is per se, potentially the more narcissistic, the less they get along with others. Again, healthy growth, healthy development, you tend to have a decently strong super ego, healthy. You can deal with a lot. You can cope. You can handle adversity. Does that explain it a little for you to give you a sense? Okay.
It's something that I've been studying more on my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unhealthy ego side.
Yeah.
And figure out the healthy, unhealthy side of it.
Someone who's really defensive tends to block change, right? And you're all in this here because you're looking development, change, et cetera, growth, all that. The more defensive somebody is, the less healthy their ego.
Interesting. Drew's got a follow up.
A little different, but
Go ahead.
what is your perspective on dealing with family trauma and having relationships with people in your family who it might not feel aligned to you because maybe they have a lot of trauma or it's just an energetic kind of difference?
Asking for a friend.
Not for me, guys.
I think get a passport, move to another country. That's what I think. No.
Some people do give that advice where they say, you know,
Like,
Yeah, I've literally seen people say, like, don't have anything to do with them. Advice is interesting because you have to think, is the person going to be able to take the advice? Right? People think as therapists, we give advice. Not exactly. It's not really what it is. What would I tell them to do? I would ask them, I'd be about what they need. What's true to you? What's good for your soul? Is it hurtful? You know, do you need it? It's unfortunate, but have you all seen the movie Get Hard? The Will Ferrell Kevin Hart movie. Okay, so there's some of you might have heard about this. There's a thing called the prison trash talk scene. Okay, so Kevin Hart is basically getting Will Ferrell to go into prison. He's got to talk trash to the other inmates. So if you go on YouTube, there's a 3.5-minute outtake version of this scene where he just goes and he just, Will Ferrell, he just does his thing. In the middle of it, he goes, "I'm going to make your inner child cry," which is brilliant. One, because if you go into prison, nobody's going to know what the hell you're talking about. And two, that's the last thing you do for your inner child. You don't hurt your inner child. That is very similar. You have to ask yourself, is this going to hurt a piece of me? Or can I tolerate it and accept it for what it is? Right? Because I think we could all accept that this world is blown out with expectations that aren't met. You have to be. People always say to me this thing, and I don't know if it's a New York thing. It might be Florida too. I'm not going to bash New York and Florida, but I'm just saying this thing like, "Can you believe they said that?" I'm like, yes, I can't believe it wasn't worse. That's always my take.
Right.
I can't believe something wasn't worse than it was. If your expectations change, again, that's where the personal growth and all the work all of you do on yourselves changes. You might go, it's fine, I can tolerate it, and I'm going to manage it with boundaries. That's the other word you're going to hear. You can't go on social media without hearing or seeing a reel about boundaries, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality, trauma bonding. I mean, it's just like, it's overwhelming. I can't watch it. I'm going to have trauma just watching it. That's why you got to limit it. It's painful and it's hard. So at some point, someone goes, I have to make a decision that's in the best of, like almost anything else, it's in the best it's best for my soul, but nobody's going to like it. And, like the recurring theme here is actually that some things not everybody's going to like. And part of being an adult, unfortunately, part of it sometimes is you're not going to please everybody and probably very few. So yeah, if I had to put,
It's also like people hurting people. That it's like forgiving them for whoever hurt them.
Yeah. you can't, it's hard not to personalize it. And then you get to a point where you go, it's, you're not going to take it in as far. And I do think there's an advantage in getting older. I do believe that. And it doesn't mean that everybody who's younger can't. I think it's self-work. And where you go, yeah, I don't think I want to, I don't want to make my inner child cry, right? Because that's the person, because you ask yourself why it bothers you, it's because it bothered you then. That's why it's triggering now. Because now you're an adult, you're like, I can walk. I don't live in this place anymore. I can go wherever the hell I want. But it's the old triggers. It's always the old stuff. That's why, and if you grow up in a family, like childhood wasn't exactly normal. I had a library of Freud books, okay? That's not normal, but we had it. And if you read Freud, it's like, yeah, your past matters. Everybody wants to avoid that their past matters. Your past matters until it doesn't.
Changing your relationship to the trigger can also be beneficial. If
I-
the trigger now is triggering the inner child.
I think if you
ask questions about the trigger, zoom out on your life and from a 30,000 foot view.
I'm curious of your relationship to the trigger.
if you look at the wound, what it's really about, you then start to, if you go out, if you do the hover view, you're like, do I need to give this time at this point? It's like, okay, this did happen. That you're going to validate all the things regardless of what anybody else does. You got a family wound. The chance that you're going to get a I'm sorry is very limited, probably. The chance that you get one and it actually hits you where you go, I believe that, is probably a lot less. I have a bridge to sell you. Right. So I always think it's the trigger. It's what's it really about? Again, going back to the beginning of the anxiety, it's like, is it really about this? Or is it about something else? And if you really understand the something else, which is usually a past thing, you start to change your relationship where you go, I need to give a crap about this now? How much pain do I need to re-inflict? Or can I go forward with it?
Beautiful thing.
This is just kind of a different perspective on what you're saying. And maybe not even just an adjustment. So for me personally, also my childhood trauma with close family. I had, mental constipation for decades, right? So repression and all of that. But it did come to a point personally that I did have to make the decision to basically cut my family out. But it was temporary. I was able to, over a course of a couple of years, be able to do enough therapy and enough healing and enough confidence building and getting over the triggers and establishing those boundaries that I was able to gradually reintroduce them into my life, and the relationship actually grew. So that's just, just because you feel like you need to, or you do need to remove yourself from somebody doesn't mean it necessarily has to be.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal example, because you can put a shunt in the system and it'll shake up the system, because it changes the relationship. And technically the relationship is the back and forth. It's the dance. You shift the dance, everybody's got to, if you're dancing one way and you change styles, everybody's going to have to change, or it's going to be really bad. And that's like a perfect example of someone taking the responsibility and courage to go just dive into what you need to do to heal. So I really appreciate you saying that. That's profound and powerful, seriously.
Awesome. Anybody else got anything?
Yeah, we're not going to do any therapy
Process.
today.
I'm gonna go around everybody. Yeah. I have another question for
Okay.
the parents in the room. You were sharing your experience of the traumatic thing that happened to you, and then it was just like, okay, have a good day at school. What advice can you give to the parents in the room about how to help their children process and cope with potentially traumatic situations? Like, do you have like a step process or some advice?
I think you have to be aware, and you have to be aware of your own fears. I mean, I think that's really a big piece of it. The parents that have a dialogue consistently, continuously, and are present, they create this space where a child will talk. I think that's really important. If it's a two-parent house, the parents need to be on the same page. They have to be on the same page in terms of, I'll say, discipline, consequence, consistency. I think when parents are emotionally available, you're modeling behavior, right? No different than fitness, right? If you take care of yourself, probably everybody's going to see it, right? If you're a parent, it boils down to this: children will watch your bad behaviors or your good ones. You choose. It's one or the other. There's no option C here, right? And for us, I thought if we didn't have the health conscious part when we were younger, we'd have been in trouble. We'd have had some serious trouble. We lucked out in that regard. Our mother was strong, but we watched so much continuously that it was a little bit more embedded in our head. So when something does happen, you're probably a little bit more resilient. Separately, if you want to watch something on Inner Child, just find me, text me. And if you want a parenting book that I helped co-wrote with my mother years ago, I'll be happy to send any copy that I have of it. Okay. So again,
Question about parents. I think it's super important, and this goes back to what you kind of said at the beginning, is asking the damn question, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And giving them that safe space to answer.
mm-hmm.
Flipping your shit when they say, no, I'm not.
Because if you show that lose your shit is the response, well, guess what you just modeled? Let's all do it. We can't all lose our shit at the same time. Somebody's got to act normal. So, hope that gives you some insights and some thought process for yourself, in terms of anything healing wise. I know it's a lot of heavy stuff, so I try to infuse a little bit of humor. But I'm very grateful that I ran into you. That was no accident, clearly.
No,
For that to go down.
I mean, I'm speechless, man. I'm thrilled that you're here and you're able to,
Right.
Bring your experience, your knowledge, your profession to this room for a very short period, an hour of our time. And
Thank you.
for me, it was extremely impactful. A lot of refreshers, a lot of new perspective, and it's a lot to process, right? So, where can everybody find you? I mean, I know you're in the group, but what's your Instagram?
It's my full name at Jason Eric Ross, because there's a lot of Jason Rosses, and it's a whole other set of jokes. And if you text me, you can get my number and you can text me any information. Like I said, I'll get you the links for Inner Child and anything that would support and nurture you. Happy to help.
Amazing. And you got any gigs coming up? Or you play in a rock band too?
So when I'm going to be on a TV show that's going to be coming out in the next year. I shot it a couple of years ago. It was the biggest thing I ever did. I never thought I was going to end up pulling it off. And the moment I walked out, I was like, you don't ever work again. You've done it. So I'm waiting on that. And if you live on the east coast of Florida, text me and I'll get you dates that the Beatles tribute band is playing, and I play in the band. That was the dream. I'm the George Harrison in the band, so I literally mimic George every which way, vocally, verbally, every little note that he does, accent, everything. So
Love
if you
it.
like Beatles music, check it out.
Sweet, dude. Well, I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate
Thanks,
you.
brother.
Thank you. Thanks all you.